Why was the woman in the wheelchair so calm while 5 motorcycles rumbled into the gas station, their riders circling like predators scenting weakness? Why did her hands not tremble, her gaze not falter, as the Crimson Reapers tried to box her in? Rachel Barnes had learned long ago that fear wastes energy, and energy, especially out here in the wilderness, was a currency you couldn't spend twice. The mountain morning was still but heavy, like air before a storm. Shadows of pine stretched across the cracked pavement of Cooper's last stop, the final outpost before 100 miles of Montana wilderness. Frank Cooper, the old Vietnam veteran behind the counter, felt it first, the tension crawling under his skin as if some old instinct had reawakened. He'd lived through ambushes, firefights, and betrayals overseas. He recognized the smell of something about to break. Rachel rolled forward from the pump, her prosthetic catching the morning light, a scar that told strangers her story before she ever opened her mouth. In the van behind her, Shadow and Ghost shifted only once, ears twitching, jaws still, their bodies taut as bowstrings strung for war. To any casual onlooker, they were just service dogs, calm, disciplined, harmless. But Rachel knew better. She had trained them, raised them from eager pups into something sharper, stronger, deadlier than steel. They were not ordinary companions. They were survivors like her. The Reapers didn't see it. They saw a wheelchair, a woman, 2 dogs, an easy morning of entertainment. "Well, boys," their leader drawled, stepping forward with a grin that smelled of arrogance, "looks like we found ourselves some company." They spread into a loose circle, casual enough for the untrained eye, but Rachel's gaze mapped their spacing instantly. It was muscle memory, angles, distances, escape lines. Training whispered through her head, every movement tells a story. These weren't just bikers. Their positioning betrayed discipline. The way they moved spoke of prior training, military, some, maybe all. Frank's hand hovered beneath his counter, brushing the cold metal he kept there for insurance. His eyes met Rachel's through the glass. He saw no panic, only calculation. One biker, patch-marked Hammer, leaned toward the van. "Nice dogs," he sneered. "Bet they fetch real good." Rachel's fingers brushed the hidden switch on her chair's armrest, connecting her to the dogs' calm harnesses. Shadow and Ghost didn't move. Their stillness was the most dangerous signal of all. "They're service animals," she said evenly, "and very well trained." The Reaper leader's smile sharpened. He crouched near her chair, lowering his voice. "Maybe we give them a little test, see how they handle strangers." The circle closed, and with it silence. No birdsong, no wind. Even Emma Leyu, the veterinarian who had just pulled into the lot, froze mid-step. She recognized danger when she saw it. But Rachel kept her voice steady. "Step back from the van," she said softly. "Particularly you, Hammer. You're inside Ghost's reaction zone." Hammer's hand was already reaching for the door handle. The growl that came next was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the quietest sound on the lot and the most terrifying. A note so low it seemed to vibrate through the bones. Hammer stumbled back, his face drained pale. "Jesus," he whispered, "what kind of service dogs are these?" "The kind," Rachel said, eyes locked on the leader, "that are allowing you to still be standing here, only because I haven't given a different command." Silence again, and in that silence history stirred. Cain, their leader, straightened. His expression changed, recognition dawning. His gaze dropped to the tactical vests on the dogs, to the subtle modifications most civilians would never notice. His voice lost its mockery. "Kandahar," he said softly. Rachel said nothing. "Ghost and Shadow," Cain continued, half to himself. "That was the report. 18 hostiles taken down in silence. Nobody believed it. Nobody thought it possible, but I remember." His eyes narrowed. You were there." For a moment time folded. Rachel was back under Afghan sun, sand burning her skin, her dogs moving like whispers through ruined compounds. The memory rose sharp and unbidden, then she forced it down. That operation was classified, she said, voice firm. Cain's grin was gone. In its place, something colder, calculating. You're not just some vet passing through. You're the one they called. Don't, Rachel cut him off. The word sliced through the air, sharper than any blade. Frank shifted behind his counter, recognition lighting in his weathered eyes. Emma clutched her phone, thumb hovering over emergency dial, heart pounding. But the bikers held their ground, their leader circling her like a predator not yet sure of the kill. You know what interests me about service dogs, Cain murmured, tilting his head. Normal ones flinch under stress. Yours, he gestured at Shadow and Ghost, still statues in the van, haven't moved a muscle. Rachel's jaw tightened. You should tell your men to step back. Cain smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He leaned closer, voice low. Maybe you don't understand, Barnes, some opportunities. He never finished the sentence. Because behind the van, a shadow shifted. Rachel had already mapped it, someone creeping along the blind spot, moving with professional silence. Too precise to be a biker drunk on bravado. Trained, professional. Frank, she said without turning, your camera's in the back lot still working. Clear as day, Frank replied. Meaning, everything is being recorded. The hidden figure froze. Rachel exhaled once calm. This was no accident. This wasn't just a chance encounter at a gas station. The Reapers weren't here by coincidence. They weren't here for intimidation. This was staging. She thought of her last deployment, the ambush that had cost her her leg. She remembered how the air had felt just before everything shattered. She felt it again now, crawling across her skin like static. Cain, she said evenly, you're not just here for gas and games. What do you really want? Cain's gaze flickered, and in that moment Rachel knew. The gas station was just the beginning. What she didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was how deep the rot ran in Eagle Valley and how far this confrontation would reach. But the dogs did. Shadow's breathing shifted, just slightly, a signal Rachel had learned to trust more than any intel briefing. Something was coming, something worse. And the woman they thought was vulnerable was about to remind them why appearances are the most dangerous deception of all. Why did Frank's hand stay under the counter even after the bikers circled back toward their leader? Why hadn't Emma dialed emergency services when her thumb hovered so close to the screen? Because both of them understood something unspoken. Help wasn't coming. Rachel had felt it too, the silence on the mountain road, the way the police cruiser had been parked just beyond sightlines earlier that week. Even the tone of dispatch chatter Frank sometimes picked up on his old shortwave radio, too polished, too careful, as if the law itself had learned how to look away. Cain saw the recognition in her eyes, and he smiled, but this time it was not arrogance, it was confirmation. You feel it, don't you? He murmured, stepping close enough for his shadow to fall across her lap. This place, this valley, the rules don't work here anymore. Rachel kept her face still. Her dogs waited, their silence more dangerous than any growl. You know what happened to me after the Corps? Cain asked, voice almost conversational. Recon Marines don't just vanish. We get absorbed, redirected. Some of us find profitable friends. He nodded toward Hammer, toward Viper lingering near the van, toward the hidden operator Rachel had already marked. You of all people know there's always a buyer for what the government buries. Rachel let his words hang, then spoke quietly. Funny thing about buried programs. Some are buried because they worked too well. Cain's eyes flickered surprise then admiration. So you do know. Emma took a slow step back toward the store, her phone slipping behind her leg as though hiding a weapon. Frank caught her movement and shook his head once. Not yet. Rachel's thumb brushed the switch on her chair again. She hadn't given the dogs a signal yet, but Ghost's chest rose sharper. Shadow's paw shifted a fraction. To anyone else they were still statues. To Rachel they were primed steel. Then Cain's voice changed. You think this ends at a gas station. You think I brought my people here to toy with you." He leaned close, dropping his voice low. "This valley has tunnels, old mining shafts. You of all people know what tunnels are good for." Rachel felt her chest tighten. Tunnels meant hidden movement, storage, transport. And secrets. "You should walk away," Rachel said, keeping her voice even though her pulse hammered. "Take your men, leave your patches, disappear." Cain tilted his head, studied her as if weighing the offer. Then he smiled thinly. "Not possible, because you're already in it, Barnes. The minute you pulled off the road, you stepped into someone else's story." He turned his back on her, a gesture of confidence or arrogance. His men didn't flinch at the exposure. That was the proof. This wasn't a biker gang built on intimidation. This was a cover. The sound came first, tires crunching gravel. A police cruiser rolled into the lot, slow and deliberate. Deputy Mark Wilson stepped out, hand resting on his holster, his eyes scanning the scene. Everything about him was wrong. The way he parked with his back to Frank's cameras. The way his gaze lingered too long on Cain, then skipped over Rachel as though she were an afterthought. "Everything all right here, folks?" Wilson asked, his voice flat, practiced. Rachel's gut twisted. This was the piece that locked the puzzle, corrupted law enforcement. Cain answered before she could. "Just teaching our guest a little about valley hospitality." Wilson smiled faintly. His hand never moved from the holster. Rachel studied him in silence. She knew that stance. The casual way he angled his body so no camera caught his expression. She had seen that before in Kandahar when one of her own had been bought and turned. Her throat tightened. The ambush, the blood, the loss of her leg, it hadn't been random. "You've been waiting for me," she said quietly. Wilson's eyes flicked toward her, a small tell. He hadn't expected her to connect the threads so fast. Frank shifted behind the counter. Emma's breath caught, phone trembling in her hand. Rachel breathed once steady. If fear was a weapon, then calm was armor. Cain's voice softened, almost respectful. "You could walk away, Barnes. Nobody would blame you. You've given enough, lost enough. But here's the truth. This valley doesn't care what you've given. It only cares what you can still provide." He nodded toward her dogs. "And your animals, they're the missing piece." The words sank in like ice. Rachel glanced once at Ghost, then Shadow. Their bodies looked relaxed, but she could feel the hum under their skin, the readiness. She remembered Kandahar, the operation no one was supposed to survive, the classified protocols that had been shut down afterward. Protocols that made her dogs more than dogs. "Why here?" Rachel asked, voice quiet but sharp. "Why now?" Cain didn't answer, but Wilson did. His voice carried that smug tone of a man who thought the game already won. "Because no one's watching this valley anymore." The silence after was heavy, the kind that cracks bones. Rachel's mind spun. If tunnels were being used, if local law was compromised, then this wasn't just about intimidation. It was about movement, storage, maybe weapons, maybe worse. She remembered the rumors after Kandahar. Programs buried, research stolen, enhancements never meant to see daylight again. Her pulse thudded once. What if they weren't rumors? Ghost shifted, a subtle movement Rachel had trained herself never to ignore. The signal meant multiple hostiles closing from outside her field of view. Her voice cut through the silence. "Frank, cameras on the ridgeline." "Already rolling," he said grimly. Which meant confirmation, more operators in the shadows, watching, waiting. Wilson adjusted his stance, hand still on his holster, as if daring her to act. Cain smiled faintly, his men tightening their circle. And Rachel Barnes, sitting in a wheelchair in the middle of a forgotten Montana gas station, felt the weight of choice pressing down like a mountain. She could stay silent, wait, survive. Or she could remind them that silence was never weakness. It was strategy. Her thumb brushed the switch again. "Shadow," she whispered under her breath, stand by. And the morning air, already heavy with threat, seemed to shift. What no one knew yet, not Cain, not Wilson, not even Frank, was that Rachel hadn't told them everything. Not about her dogs, not about her past, not about the reason she had come to Eagle Valley in the first place. That truth was still buried, and until the right moment she would keep it that way. Because sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones that wait in silence. Why did Rachel's stomach tighten the moment she saw Wilson's eyes dart toward the ridgeline? Why did Shadow's breath change, just slightly, as if the dog knew something even she could not see? Because danger rarely announced itself directly. It seeped in at the edges, disguised as routine. The gas station had become a stage. Players in their places, Cain and his men in a loose circle, Rachel in her chair with Shadow and Ghost still statues in the van, Frank at the counter with his shotgun hidden, Emma clutching her phone like a lifeline, and Wilson standing with his hand on his holster, the lawman turned sentinel of corruption. The stillness pressed on Rachel's chest. She had felt this exact air once before, years ago in Kandahar, seconds before everything broke into chaos, and it had cost her a leg. Cain moved first, breaking the silence. His voice was quiet, deliberate, as though he wanted only Rachel to hear. "You think this is about intimidation. It is. It's about proof. Proof that what you built still works." Her chest clenched. The classified protocols, the enhancements, the research she had sworn never to let escape. "Don't play games with me," she said, her voice low but steady. Cain crouched, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled of fuel and tobacco, but his eyes were sharp, alive. "I've read the reports, not the sanitized ones, the real ones. You took ordinary canines and made them into something the brass couldn't even describe without using words like unprecedented. You gave them instincts wired to technology, training wired to heartbeat. And then they tried to erase it, tried to erase you." Rachel's gaze hardened, but she did not deny it. Wilson shifted, the faint crunch of gravel betraying impatience. "Enough," he muttered. "She's not here to listen. She's here to hand over what she knows, or—" Rachel's voice cut him sharp. "Or what? You'll stage another ambush, like Kandahar." The words landed like stones dropped in still water. Frank's eyes snapped toward her. Emma froze, her phone trembling. Cain tilted his head, watching her. "So you've started putting it together." Memories she had buried clawed to the surface. That night in Kandahar, the compound, the sudden betrayal, the way her dogs had dragged her bleeding body back to cover while men she trusted vanished into the dark. The voice in her ear then, the one that had told her extraction was coming, when it never did. "You sold us out," she said softly. Wilson's jaw tightened. Cain didn't flinch. But Hammer shifted uneasily. Even hardened men felt the weight of those words. Emma's breath caught. "You mean?" Rachel's throat tightened. She didn't finish. Some truths were heavier when spoken aloud. Cain leaned back, straightening. "You think too small, Barnes. This valley isn't about betrayal, it's about opportunity. Those tunnels, they're more than dirt and rock. They're arteries, moving what governments bury, technology, medicine, weapons, even your precious protocols." He gestured lazily at Shadow and Ghost. "Proof that we're already closer than you think." Rachel's hands tightened on her chair. The silence inside her dogs was no accident. They were listening, reading, waiting. "You're building something in those tunnels," she said. "Something bigger than drugs or guns." Cain smiled faintly. "Bigger than anything you've ever trained for." Wilson's radio crackled. Static. Then a coded burst of numbers. He tapped it once casually as though acknowledging a secret. Frank caught it too. His jaw clenched, his thumb brushing the safety on the shotgun beneath the counter. Emma whispered, "Rachel, what is this?" Rachel's eyes didn't leave Cain. "This is the same game that cost me my leg, only this time they've brought it home." Silence stretched. The sun climbed higher, shadows sharpened across the lot. Then movement. From the ridge above the station, figures shifted into view. Black silhouettes against the sky, not bikers, too disciplined, too precise. Operators. Rachel's stomach dropped. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was containment. Frank, she said quietly, get those recordings to someone you trust, not local, federal. I already have, Frank answered, voice rough. Cain chuckled, the sound low and humorless. Always the soldier, even when you're not. But here's the truth, Barnes, you don't control this battlefield. I do. Rachel's thumb brushed the hidden switch on her chair. Shadow's ears twitched. Ghost's chest rose and fell once measured. But she didn't give the command. Not yet. Instead, she leaned forward. You want me alive, she said quietly. Otherwise, you would have moved already. So what's really in those tunnels? What are you afraid I'll see? For the first time, Cain's smile faltered. Wilson's hand tightened on his holster. Careful, he warned. But the warning wasn't for her. It was for Cain. Rachel saw it then, the fracture, the crack in the armor. Wilson and Cain weren't perfectly aligned. Their alliance was convenience, not conviction. She could use that. Emma's voice shook. Rachel, we need to leave now. Rachel didn't answer, because she knew leaving wasn't possible anymore. Not with the ridgeline crawling with operators, not with the tunnels humming like veins beneath the valley. Shadow's breathing changed again. Rachel heard it in her calm, two flanking left and right. The trap was tightening. And Rachel Barnes, who had survived Kandahar by refusing to panic, knew exactly what she had to do. She leaned back in her chair, exhaled once, and whispered a command only her dogs could hear. The kind of command no biker, no corrupt deputy, no operator in the shadows could possibly expect from what looked like two calm, harmless service animals. The kind of command that would turn silence into a weapon. Why did the growl sound so different this time? Low, surgical, almost deliberate. Why did Cain's men stiffen, not because of volume but because of precision? Because Shadow and Ghost were no longer pretending. The first growl rippled through the lot like a vibration in steel. Hammer, who had nearly touched the van, froze mid-step. His hand hung in the air, uncertain. The Reapers had seen aggressive dogs before, farm mutts, guard dogs, junkyard biters. But this was not that. This was a sound engineered through years of conditioning, a frequency calibrated to bypass logic and punch directly into the lizard brain. And it worked. Hammer stumbled back, his bravado evaporating. Jesus Christ, they ain't normal. Cain's gaze sharpened. He didn't flinch, didn't retreat, but his jaw flexed as though he recognized the resonance. K9 protocols, he muttered, almost reverently. Rachel said nothing. Her hand rested calmly on the chair's arm, her thumb poised over the switch. Her silence was louder than their noise. Wilson's hand hovered near his holster. He wasn't staring at Rachel. He was staring at Cain. His eyes said it plain, control your people before this unravels. But Cain didn't. He leaned closer, his voice low and measured. That sound, I heard it once, in a briefing after Kandahar. They said it was like the desert itself growled, that men froze before they even saw what was coming. Tell me, Barnes, his smile curled faintly, do they still call you Ghostmaker? Rachel's chest tightened. She hated that name. She hated the mythology the brass had spun after operations no one wanted to admit existed. But she hated more that Cain knew it. Emma's eyes darted between them, panic etched across her face. Rachel, she whispered, what's going on? Frank's voice came from the doorway, steady but grim. What's going on is classified history clawing its way back to daylight. Cain turned, studying Frank. For the first time his grin thinned. You, he said slowly, I should have guessed. Master Sergeant Cooper, recon, retired but not retired enough. Frank didn't deny it. He just lifted the shotgun into plain view. Some of us remember what honor used to mean. The tension crackled, thick and brittle. Then movement. From the ridge, 3 silhouettes detached from the tree line, moving with fluid precision. 2 deliberate for civilians. 2 synchronized for coincidence. Operators confirmed. Rachel's dogs didn't bark, didn't lunge. Instead, their breathing shifted in unison. A signal only she could read. Positions marked. Threat profiles logged. She whispered under her breath, "Stand by Delta." Shadow and Ghost's muscles tightened imperceptibly. To anyone else, they still looked calm. But to Rachel, they had just shifted from service mode into combat readiness. Cain noticed the subtle change. His grin returned, colder this time. "You don't understand, Barnes. This isn't a fight you can win. You're outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded." Rachel's reply was calm, almost soft. "You've mistaken numbers for power." Wilson cleared his throat, trying to retake control. "Enough posturing. We need to move her. Now." The way he said it sent a chill through Rachel's spine. Move her, not arrest, not de-escalate, move. This wasn't about law enforcement. This was transfer, extraction. Her fingers pressed the switch. A whisper clicked through her comm. Ghost's breath, Shadow's low rumble, her lifeline. She turned her chair slightly, eyes on Wilson. "Who are you moving me to?" Wilson's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. But Cain did. "The same people who buried you in Kandahar. The ones who kept your work alive while you sat at home thinking you'd stopped it." The words landed like lead. Rachel's throat went dry. Her mind raced back to the compound, the classified programs, the restricted protocols she'd been told were shut down forever. She had believed it. She had wanted to believe it. And now, standing in the dust of Eagle Valley, she realized she had been wrong. Cain gestured toward the ridgeline. More figures appeared, descending like shadows peeling off the mountain. 8, maybe 10, all moving with professional economy. Emma's voice cracked. "We have to leave, please." "No," Rachel cut her off, voice firm, her eyes locked on Cain. "You brought them here for me, so let's stop pretending this is random." Cain's grin widened. Finally, clarity. He whistled once, sharp. His men shifted subtly, tightening the noose. Wilson's hand slid fully onto his weapon. Rachel's chair vibrated faintly as her comm registered incoming signals. More operators, positions multiplying. It was the exact same pattern she had seen in Kandahar. Official presence as distraction, while hidden units moved in for capture. Her chest burned. This was the same play. And she wasn't going to let it end the same way. She breathed once, slow and steady. Her hand brushed the switch. Shadow, Ghost. The names came out calm, even almost tender. Both dogs' heads lifted in perfect unison. Their eyes locked on Rachel. Their ears twitched, awaiting the silent command that would change everything. Cain's grin faltered just slightly. He saw it too late. The game had shifted. Because Rachel Barnes was done waiting for permission. She whispered the word that no biker, no deputy, no operator expected from a woman in a wheelchair with 2 calm service animals. Execute. Why did silence fall heavier after that one word left her lips? Why did even the wind seem to hesitate, as though the valley itself recognized what had just been unleashed? Because the word execute wasn't a threat, it was a trigger. Shadow moved first, not with fury but with precision. A single step out of the van, deliberate, fluid, controlled. His muscles didn't ripple with wild aggression, they coiled with surgical intent. Ghost followed, mirroring him, their formation tight, their breathing synced as if they shared one lung. To the Reapers it looked unreal. 2 animals, calm as monks, stepping into position like soldiers trained in silence. Cain's eyes lit with something Rachel recognized. Not fear, recognition. He had read the files, but seeing the truth made belief heavier. "Protocol Delta," he whispered. Rachel didn't confirm. She didn't need to. Hammer cursed under his breath. Viper stepped back. Even Wilson, hardened by years of corrupted power, flinched. His hand slid off his holster just slightly. The operators on the ridge froze in place. They weren't sure anymore if they were hunting or being measured. Frank's shotgun clicked faintly. Emma's lips parted, breath shallow. Rachel's voice carried across the lot, steady and sharp. "You wanted proof, Cain, now you have it. But here's what you forgot, proof cuts both ways." Shadow's growl vibrated low and controlled. Ghost's ears twitched once, catching a movement from the ridge. Their eyes never left Rachel, waiting for her next word. Cain tried to hold on to control. "You're surrounded, Barnes, you can't." Rachel cut him off, her voice calm. "Surrounded is just another word for opportunity. You see enemies on all sides. I see directions." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The mountain air grew heavy, pressing on every chest. Then the first misstep. One of the operators on the ridge shifted too quickly, breaking formation, adjusting his rifle. That was all it took. Shadow exploded forward, not wild, not reckless. A streak of calculated velocity. His body hit the ground low, silent, covering distance like a shadow thrown by firelight. Ghost mirrored him, peeling opposite. Cain's men shouted, confusion breaking their circle. Hammer fumbled backward. Viper swore, reaching for his blade instead of his gun, instinct failing him. Wilson barked, "Hold position," but his voice cracked on the order. Frank stepped forward, shotgun raised. "Not in my station, you don't." Emma gasped, her phone clattering to the ground, eyes wide as the two dogs cut arcs across the lot with terrifying grace. But Rachel didn't watch the chaos. She listened, to the breathing in her calm, to the rhythm of movement she had once trained, to the signals only she could interpret. Shadow's pulse shifted, left flank neutralized. Ghost's cadence sharpened, operator down, second hesitating. Cain's men tried to recover, but every step they took only exposed their lack of understanding. They were fighters, yes, but they weren't trained for this. Not for animals wired to act like extensions of a soldier's mind. Cain himself didn't move. He just watched, lips tightening, eyes narrowing. For the first time, Rachel saw calculation tip toward unease. She spoke into the silence he left behind. "You think this is about me, about my dogs, but you're wrong. This valley isn't your stage, it's your graveyard." Wilson snarled, ripping his weapon free, pointing it toward her. "Enough." But before his finger could tighten, Ghost slid between Rachel and the barrel, his body a wall of fur and muscle, his growl vibrating deep enough to rattle teeth. Wilson froze, sweat beaded on his forehead, his finger trembled. And Rachel, calm, measured, met his eyes. "You were there in Kandahar, weren't you?" The words hit like a strike. Wilson's jaw locked. His silence was confirmation. Emma whispered, "Oh my God." Cain turned slowly toward the deputy, realization dawning. "You never told me you were inside." Wilson didn't answer. His face was stone. But Rachel's chest burned. She had suspected corruption. She hadn't known until now that it had bled this far back, that the same betrayal that shattered her body overseas had followed her home. She exhaled once, forcing calm. "All this time you were never law, you were cleanup, keeping the valley quiet while they built their tunnels." Wilson's eyes flickered, just enough to confirm. Cain barked a laugh, sudden and sharp. "Well, isn't that rich? Even your allies eat their own." But the laugh was brittle. Because Cain understood something Wilson didn't. Rachel Barnes wasn't broken anymore. Shadow reappeared at her side, bloodless calm, eyes still locked on her. Ghost shifted his stance, pressing close, steady as stone. Her dogs weren't just weapons. They were memory made flesh, loyalty that couldn't be bought, honor that couldn't be corrupted. Cain shook his head slowly, almost admiringly. "You really did it. You made them into more than animals, and now they'll die with you." Rachel's voice was soft. "That's where you're wrong. They don't die with me. They live beyond me." Cain's grin faltered. Then the ground shifted, literally. A low rumble rolled under their feet, like the valley itself groaning awake. Dust puffed from the gas station's side lot. The earth vibrated in uneven pulses. Emma clutched Frank's arm. "What is that?" Frank's face went pale. "Tunnels," he muttered. "Something moving below us." Cain's eyes flicked toward the dust. "On schedule." Rachel's stomach tightened. This was it. Whatever they were hiding, whatever Wilson was protecting, it was moving now. She glanced at Frank. "Get Emma inside, lock it down, and if anything happens, send the footage." Frank nodded, no hesitation. He pushed Emma back toward the store, shotgun raised, jaw set. Rachel turned back to Cain, her voice quiet but unyielding. "You wanted proof. You're about to get it, but it won't be the kind you control." The rumble deepened, closer, stronger. And Rachel Barnes, who had already lost a leg to betrayal, realized the fight ahead wasn't just about survival. It was about pulling the truth from the earth itself. And no matter what crawled out of those tunnels, she would face it. Because dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't posture. It acts. Why did the ground itself seem to breathe? Why did each vibration feel less like machinery and more like a heartbeat rising from beneath the valley? Because the tunnels weren't just hiding cargo, they were alive with purpose. The rumble grew, shaking dust loose from the gas station's roof, rattling the glass until Emma whimpered from inside. Frank pulled her down behind the counter, shotgun still aimed at the door, his old soldier's instincts cutting through the years like they had never left. Outside, Rachel felt the vibration through her chair, through her prosthetic, through the dogs' tense bodies at her side. Ghost's ears pinned back. Shadow's chest rose in sharp bursts, his breathing translating into signals Rachel understood as clearly as words. Movement, multiple, converging. Cain's grin widened. "You hear it, don't you? That's progress, that's inevitability." Rachel kept her face still. Her pulse hammered, but her voice was calm. "No, that's corruption clawing its way out of the ground." Wilson shifted his stance, the deputy badge on his chest catching the morning light like a cruel joke. His weapon lowered, but not in surrender, in confidence. He knew reinforcements were coming. Rachel locked eyes with him. "Tell me one thing, Wilson. Back then, Kandahar, who gave the order." His silence was answer enough. Shadow growled, low and steady. Ghost mirrored it, their tones harmonizing until the air itself vibrated. Cain shook his head, almost in awe. "Even now you command without words. No wonder they feared you." Rachel didn't look at him. She was watching the ground, where cracks were appearing in the dust. Then it happened. The earth broke open. A steel hatch, disguised under layers of dirt and stone, groaned upward on hydraulics. The sound was deep, mechanical, like the valley exhaling secrets it had kept too long. Dust billowed, coating everything in gray haze. From the opening, lights flickered, cold, artificial, sterile, and then shadows moved. Not bikers, not operators, something heavier. Emma gasped inside the store. Frank's jaw clenched, the shotgun trembling just slightly in his old hands. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Whatever emerged carried the weight of design, of planning, and it wasn't just people climbing out. It was crates, equipment, pallets stacked and hauled by figures in tactical gear with blank patches, their faces obscured, their movements efficient. Cain's voice carried pride. "You're looking at tomorrow's market, untraceable, unstoppable. Technology your government tried to kill, reborn under the mountain, and now delivered to the highest bidder." Rachel's stomach twisted. The crates bore markings she recognized, not military issue, not foreign, familiar, painfully familiar. Her own past stared back at her. "Those are mine," she whispered, fury slipping into her voice for the first time. Cain smiled thinly. "Not anymore." Shadow barked once, sharp. Ghost leaned forward, muscles taut. Rachel lifted her hand, calming them. "Not yet, timing mattered, always timing." She forced her voice steady. Cain, you think you control this, but you don't. You're just a courier in someone else's scheme. They'll burn you the second you stop being useful. Cain chuckled. Maybe, but until then, I live well. Wilson snapped, his patience fraying. Enough talk, move her. Two operators advanced from the ridge, rifles angled, steps precise. They weren't amateurs. They weren't hesitant. They were men on contract, paid to complete a job, no questions asked. Ghost's head tilted slightly. Shadow's tail stiffened. Rachel breathed once. If you touch me, she said quietly, you won't leave this lot alive. Cain smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Bluffing Barnes. Rachel leaned forward, her gaze sharp. You've read the files. Was I bluffing then? The moment stretched, taut as wire. Then chaos. One operator reached for her chair. Shadow lunged, silent as smoke, his jaws locking onto the man's arm before he could react. Ghost struck the other, not with teeth but with the brutal force of his body, knocking the rifle wide before clamping down on the wrist. The men screamed, the sound raw and untrained. These weren't soldiers. They were mercenaries, bought and now broken. Cain's men scrambled, shouting, their formation collapsing. Wilson swore, raising his pistol, but Ghost swung the operator into his line of sight, forcing him to hesitate. Rachel didn't move. She didn't need to. She watched, calm, controlled, her dogs enacting training years in the making. Every breath they took was part of her. Every strike, every hold, every pause, they were extensions of her will. Emma covered her mouth inside, eyes wide, tears streaking her cheeks. Frank muttered a curse, gripping the counter, both horrified and proud. Cain watched too, his grin gone now. What replaced it was something harder, respect and fear. You still have it, he murmured. Rachel's voice was soft. I never lost it. The operators fell, groaning, disarmed, broken but alive. Ghost and Shadow returned to her side, chests heaving but eyes steady, awaiting the next word. The hatch yawned open behind Cain, the crates still rising, the tunnels still exhaling secrets. Rachel turned her gaze there, her voice quieter now, almost reflective. This valley isn't a market, it's a wound, and every wound festers when you bury it instead of healing it. Cain tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Wilson broke the silence, his voice sharp, desperate. She doesn't leave here, not alive. Rachel's chest tightened, the same words, the same cadence she had once heard in Kandahar. Her eyes burned, but she kept her voice level. I survived once, I'll survive again. The difference is this time I'm not the one surrounded, you are. Cain turned confused. What? Frank's voice thundered from the doorway. You forgot one thing, son. Cain spun just as the old soldier raised his phone, the red recording light glaring in the sun. You're live, Frank said. Every camera, every feed, already uploaded. Every move you make from here on documented. Cain's face paled. Wilson's eyes went wide with fury. And Rachel, calm in her chair, felt the shift. Power no longer belonged to the men with guns, or the tunnels, or the corrupted law. It belonged to truth. And truth had just been set free. Why did Wilson's face turn a shade paler than the dust swirling from the hatch? Why did Cain's grin vanish the second Frank lifted that phone into the sunlight? Because control had just shifted, and not in their favor. The valley wasn't silent anymore. Its secrets were no longer buried. Frank's words hung heavy, echoing louder than the rumble of the tunnels. Already uploaded. Cain's men shifted uneasily. They weren't afraid of Rachel, not exactly. They weren't afraid of Frank's shotgun either. They were afraid of exposure, afraid that the carefully constructed illusion of invincibility had cracked. Wilson's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, fury in his eyes, pistol raised toward Frank. You think a recording scares me? Frank didn't flinch. Not you, but whoever's paying you. They don't like cameras. They don't like daylight. They'll burn you alive the second they think you're sloppy. The words landed like nails. Wilson's hand trembled, his pistol wavering. Rachel saw it, the fracture widening, the alliance fraying. Wilson needed silence to keep his power. Cain needed chaos to keep his leverage. Both men now realized they couldn't have both. Shadow growled. Ghost pressed against Rachel's side, his body a living shield. She leaned forward in her chair, her voice soft but cutting. Look around you. This isn't a standoff. It's a collapse. And the only question left is who gets buried in it. Cain's eyes darted to the hatch, to the crates still rising. He couldn't abandon them. Too much investment, too much promise. But he also couldn't ignore the lens of Frank's phone, the silent witness documenting every betrayal. Wilson snapped. End it now. He swung his pistol toward Rachel, his finger tightening. But before he could fire, Ghost lunged, not for the weapon but for the ground at Wilson's feet. His jaws clamped on gravel, wrenching his head, sending a spray of stone upward. Wilson staggered, blinded by grit. His shot cracked wide, shattering glass from the station's front window. Emma screamed. Frank ducked, pulling her down with him. Cain's men panicked, half drawing weapons, half retreating. The operators from the ridge froze, uncertain. Their contracts hadn't covered this kind of exposure. Rachel's heart pounded, but her voice stayed level. Shadow, Ghost, hold. Both dogs froze mid-motion, their eyes locked on her, their muscles vibrating with tension but perfectly controlled. The stillness was more terrifying than the chaos. Cain knew it too. His gaze lingered on the animals, then on Rachel, as though finally accepting that she wasn't the weak link in this chain, she was the fulcrum. You could have disappeared, he said quietly, rolled away, lived your life in peace. Why come back to the valley? Rachel's throat tightened. She thought of the letter, the anonymous tip that had brought her here, the line that had haunted her for weeks, "They're moving your work. Check Eagle Valley." She hadn't told anyone, not Frank, not Emma, not even her dogs. Some secrets weighed too heavy to share. But now, under Cain's stare, she whispered, "Because unfinished business doesn't stay buried." The hatch groaned wider, more crates rising. One split open as it scraped the edge, its contents spilling. Emma gasped, Frank's jaw hardened, even Cain faltered. Because inside wasn't weapons, not in the conventional sense. It was vests, harnesses, modified rigs designed not for men but for animals. K9 rigs, upgraded, altered. Rachel's chest burned, her past staring back at her in steel and nylon. Cain's smile returned, crueler this time. Recognition looks good on you. See, Barnes, you're not fighting us, you're fighting yourself, your legacy. Her eyes stung, but she refused to let them break. That's not my legacy, that's my theft, my betrayal. Wilson wiped grit from his eyes, pistol still shaking in his grip. It doesn't matter what you call it, it's here, and it's ours now. Rachel inhaled once, deep and steady. Her voice softened, almost like prayer. No, it's mine to end. For the first time, Cain hesitated. He wasn't afraid of bullets. He wasn't afraid of exposure. But he was afraid of conviction, the kind that couldn't be bribed, bullied, or bought. The operators on the ridge began to pull back, murmuring to one another. Their contracts weren't worth this. Not with cameras rolling. Not with a woman in a wheelchair commanding more discipline in her silence than they had in their rifles. The Reapers shifted uneasily. Hammer muttered, "Boss, maybe this ain't." "Shut up," Cain snapped, though his voice cracked. Wilson barked, desperate now. "Do it, kill her before." He never finished. Because Frank's shotgun roared, the blast intentional, shattering the asphalt at Wilson's feet. The deputy stumbled back, cursing, pistol flying from his hand. Frank's voice thundered, the command of a man who had led soldiers before. "This ends now." The valley seemed to listen. Even the rumble from below quieted, as though waiting for the next word. Rachel's dogs froze in perfect formation, eyes locked on her. She felt their hearts pounding through the calm, matched to her own. She looked at Cain, then at Wilson. Two men, two paths. one corrupted by greed, the other by power, both convinced she was just a remnant of the past. Her voice broke the silence, steady and final. "You wanted proof. Here it is. I'm still here, and I'm not afraid." The weight of those words settled over the lot. Cain's men lowered their weapons. The operators on the ridge melted into the trees. Even Hammer stepped back, shaking his head. Wilson stood alone, chest heaving, eyes wild. His voice cracked, desperate. "This isn't over. You think one video, one stand changes anything. They'll come back. They always come back." Rachel's voice softened, almost sorrowful. "Maybe, but when they do, they'll find something you never understood." She reached down, resting her hand on Shadow's head, Ghost pressing against her knee. "Loyalty you can't buy, dignity you can't break." Wilson's face twisted, his fury hollow now. He stumbled back toward the hatch, retreating into the shadows below. Cain watched him go, then turned to Rachel. For a moment his mask slipped. Regret or envy, she couldn't tell. He whispered almost to himself, "Sometimes I wonder, if I'd had dogs like that, maybe I wouldn't have sold everything else." Then he too turned, fading into the dust, his men trailing uncertainly behind him. The hatch began to groan shut, the mountain reclaiming its secrets. But Rachel knew the truth. The valley's wound wasn't healed, not yet. She closed her eyes, listening to the dog's steady breathing, the silence that followed the chaos. And in that silence she found her strength again. Because survival wasn't about winning every fight. It was about refusing to surrender your soul. Why did the valley grow so quiet after the hatch sealed shut? Why did even the birds hesitate to return, as if afraid of what had just been buried again? Because silence after truth feels heavier than noise. Rachel sat motionless in her chair, the dust slowly settling across the lot. Shadow pressed against her left side, Ghost against her right, their breathing steady now, the faint tremors of readiness fading. They had not failed her. They had never failed her. Emma emerged from the store, her face streaked with tears, glass crunching under her shoes. "Is it over?" she whispered. Frank shook his head slowly. "For now, but not forever." He lowered his shotgun, his old hands trembling only slightly. "Secrets like that don't stay buried, they just wait." Rachel's eyes lingered on the hatch, on the faint outline where Earth had been disturbed. She remembered Kandahar, the compound, the betrayal, the blood. She remembered believing she had ended it all when she came home. But now she knew the truth. It had only gone underground. Emma knelt beside her, voice small. "Why didn't you leave? Why stay when all of this?" Rachel looked at her, her expression calm but weary. "Because leaving never stops what's underneath. You can't outrun a wound. You either let it rot or you clean it out." Emma blinked, her eyes wet. "But you can't do it alone." Rachel glanced at Shadow, then Ghost. A faint smile touched her lips. "I never was." The sun broke through the haze, shafts of light striking the cracked pavement. For a brief moment, the valley looked almost beautiful, as if trying to pretend it had not just revealed its ugliness. Cain's men were gone, scattered into the trees. The operators had vanished, their contracts dissolved the second the cameras turned. Wilson had retreated into the tunnels, clutching his rage like a torch in the dark. But Rachel wasn't chasing them. Not now, not yet. She turned to Frank, the footage. He held up his phone, the red light still glowing. "Safe. Sent to 3 places already. If they try to bury it, it'll surface again." Rachel nodded once. Relief didn't show on her face, but her chest loosened just slightly. Emma stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "So, what happens now?" Rachel exhaled, her eyes drifting back to the horizon. The road stretched on, empty and waiting. Beyond it, the world turned, unaware of the valley's secrets, unaware of the fight that had just taken place in silence. Her voice was soft, almost reflective. "Now we wait, we watch, we prepare." Frank studied her, then asked quietly, "And when they come back?" Rachel placed her hand gently on Ghost's head. Shadow leaning into her side. She didn't smile, but her voice held something steadier than hope, conviction. "Then we remind them," she said, "that dignity doesn't beg, it doesn't fear, it doesn't run." The wind picked up, carrying the last of the dust across the lot, scattering it like ashes. Emma hugged her arms around herself. "I don't understand how you stay so calm." Rachel's gaze lingered on the hatch, then on the sky beyond. "Because fear already took enough from me once. I won't let it take the rest." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The valley breathed quietly, the mountains watching like silent witnesses. Finally, Frank set his shotgun against the counter and straightened, his back aching but his eyes sharp. "You've got a place here, Barnes, if you want it." Rachel shook her head gently. "You've already given enough. Keep Emma safe. Keep the footage alive. That's your fight." Frank studied her, then nodded once. "And yours." She stroked Shadow's head, Ghost pressing close at her knee. Her eyes hardened with quiet resolve. "Mine is making sure they never use what's in those tunnels. Not here. Not anywhere." Emma's voice trembled, "But how?" Rachel looked at her, her expression soft but unyielding. "By being patient, by being quiet, by being ready." She turned her chair slightly, wheels crunching on gravel, facing the road ahead. The sun caught her prosthetic, the metal glinting like a scar that refused to hide. Shadow and Ghost rose in unison, falling into formation beside her. Not pets, not tools, partners. Rachel took a slow breath, the mountain air filling her chest. The fight wasn't finished. Maybe it never would be. But she had remembered something she had almost lost. Her dignity wasn't in her leg or her medals or the files they had stolen. It was in the way she endured, the way she stood by sitting, the way she fought by refusing to break. As she rolled forward, her voice came like a whisper carried by the wind. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The road stretched before her, empty, endless, waiting. And Rachel Barnes, with Shadow and Ghost at her side, moved into it, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a keeper of silence that could roar louder than any gunfire.